and welcome to episode number 83 of Killer POV. I'm one of your hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright and FearNet. With me as always, Elric Kane.
Yeah, I'm missing Rebecca McKendry today.
Are you missing her for real?
I'm not missing her at all. I'm actually perfectly happy to go on, you know.
Yes, and I know we had vowed not to do a show without one of us, if one of us wasn't here, but...
But we lied.
But we lied because Becca doesn't count. No, that's not true. We love Becca. We love you. No, it's that it's, this is our Thanksgiving / Black Friday show episode. And, things are a little complicated with the holidays. So our schedule is kind of out of whack.
And I almost didn't make it.
You almost didn't make it. Becca definitely didn't make it. But
sick from baby.
The guest we had could make it. And that's all that matters because this is somebody that we wanted to have on since we started the show.
And someone who I've talked about, The House of the Devil was the film that got me back into horror after years of kind of being disinterested. So,
did you know that, guest?
Did you care? Or it doesn't even matter if you knew.
Let's welcome to the show, Ty West.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to hear that. I don't know. We've talked before on other formats, so I'm aware that you've been kind to me in my movies. But that's,
I think there's periods where you lose, and you just probably like the same with making horror films where you almost naturally
I've lost interest. I understand completely.
Yeah, you have to detach yourself because otherwise at a certain point they all become the same. But I think this period has been a little different because of how many independent films have been made. So their voices are a little more interesting than when it was just studio dominated, after the 80s where there was so much creativity going on. It kind of went through a plateau. So anyway, you and Neil Marshall's The Descent were the two I saw sing right next to each other, and I was just like, oh.
Yeah,
this is happening in horror. Like, okay. I'm interested again.
No, it's good stuff for sure. So, God, where do we want to start? I mean...
Well, what's going on now? Like, I know it's exciting to see you making something different and making a Western, which is the ultimate American movie.
Yeah, that's how I feel about the genre. It's cool. I just sort of finished editing, so I've got about 3 months probably of sound and music to do because that's a really painstaking, meticulous process for me. But... I'm excited to get through that because that's when I get my second wind, and that's when the movie starts to become the movie. For me, the way I edit, because I don't use any temp music or anything, it's like it's the story, but it's not really the pizzazz of the movie. And I'm so involved with Graham Resnick and Jeff Grace, the sound designer and composer, that it's really like this whole other remix to the movie that becomes the movie that everyone is. Oh, that's the movie. So for me, it's great to start this process. So I get to be excited again because the editing part is really like a grind. It's a good grind, but it's like 2 months of you trying to shape the story in a way where the sound design is really trying to shape the energy that you want out of the movie.
And you're still the editor on this one?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the happiest thing about hearing about this film is when I heard that you're working with Travolta and Ethan Hawke. I just assumed you were now making a studio film and somebody else's script, but it's still completely altruistic. As far as I can tell, it looks like the same as your other films.
Yeah, I just decided after getting burned before, and I could be wrong. It's not really a matter of right or wrong. It's more of just this is the only way it makes sense to me, and that might change down the road. But for now, for me, making movies is it sounds so horrible to say I don't make it for the audience because it sounds like I just sound like an asshole. But I don't. I'm making it for me. And I mean that in the way that I'm trying to make the movie that with the thing that I've imagined in my head, the movie is just trying to make that real. And it's the only way I know how to do it. And then the process of doing it, when it's good and bad, it's all very traumatic, but all of it is part of it for me. So it could be selfish, but for me, or you could say it's pretentious and you're an artist and stuff like that in a sort of goofy way. But I look back on if you ask what I was doing in 2008, I'd be like, well, I lived in Connecticut and I was making this movie and it was about a devil thing. We were living in this haunted hotel and I have all these stories from my life and I could tell you everything about the whole process of that movie. And it's it's a chapter in my life also. So for me, making these indie movies where you don't make a tremendous amount of money doing it, I suppose it could happen. But for the most part, I have a bit of an esoteric taste. So if I'm going to do my own thing, then the corny word of the journey that I'm on is part of it. So I just decided after getting burned where I was more optimistic that it would work out another way. I just was so unhappy with the results. And then another time I got fired because I just wasn't really willing to do it the other way. For now, it's just, I'm either going to do this or I'll do something else because I'm not interested in doing it another way because I just won't have any fun. And it's I'm almost, in a way, I almost make movies, or I don't want to have a job. And if I'm not doing everything and it doesn't feel like my thing, then it feels like I have a job, and then I would just assume I'll do a podcast or something. I'll do something else.
Right.
Yeah. There's always a seat here.
It's not that,
If it gets to that, there's a seat here.
We always have
but it's weird though, because a lot of that seems like it's like, oh, you think you know everything. I don't think I know anything. I don't even think I'm any good at it, but like I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like this idea of like, well, aren't there people better at it? I'm sure there's a million editors. I might be a terrible editor. But it's part of the movie making for me. And as of right now, I want to do that. You know, I operate the camera too. And like, you could get a better camera operator and you'd be behind the monitor and be more in tune with but I won't be more in tune because I will feel like I'm not doing what I want to be doing, which is being part of the process. And maybe that has limitations, and maybe, you know, I try to be very transparent with everybody about that. And maybe they're like, oh, I don't want to sign up for that. But that's the way I do things.
I always have a tremendous amount of respect for, you know, hearing stories about you over the years. Like Larry was here last week and said when he initially met you, you know, you had one idea for a movie and then like 5 more ideas. And, you know, the thing I've always respected is that you always are moving forward and trying to make something. Like in between every movie, like, of course, you know, House of the Devil came out, got a lot of accolades. And then I heard you were going to maybe do this sci-fi thing with like Nicole Kidman, and that didn't happen, but it didn't matter. You went right into the Innkeepers. You know what I mean? Like, and even House of the Devil was kind of the thing that was delayed for a while. And you're like, well, fuck it, I'm going to make Trigger Man. I just need, you know, I appreciate your desire to just keep making something rather than, you know, a lot of filmmakers get kind of in that wheel of like, oh, nobody wants to do my thing and get stuck.
Well, last night we had the directors of Starry Eyes, and they said it
last
took
week.
Well, yeah, we taped it last night, but whatever. But they told us it took them 16 years to to just do it, you know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm ambitious enough to not to do. You know what I mean? Like I don't have I have just making like this Western is like my ambition for right now, and then I kind of know what I want to do next, and maybe I'll change my mind. But if I do what I do next, like that's all. It's like whatever happens with the movie is like, of course you want it to do as well as possible and as many people to see it, but it's like one day at a time in a way. And I just feel like I don't want to sit around waiting on someone else to allow me to do something. That just, to me, that's just like a really stressful, unpleasant way to live my life. So it's difficult because when you make movies, you really are at the mercy of other people because I'm not super wealthy. So I can't put millions of dollars into a movie. And that's a shame. You know what I mean? It'd be great just to bet on yourself. But since I don't have the opportunity to do that, you have to work with other people. And I've been fortunate to work with some pretty great people. But you know, it's the personal way that I go about it is sometimes at odds with the commerciality of it.
Right. How did you attract, I read somewhere that Ethan Hawke was the first piece of the Western, and that kind of got the ball wrong. How did that all start? And also, where did the Western idea come from?
Well, I wanted to do either a comedy or a Western, but most likely a comedy. And then I heard that Ethan Hawke wanted to do a Western. And I really, really, really like Ethan Hawke. So I thought, well, if I could convince him to do my Western, then I could probably get this movie made. And I know Jason Blum for a few years because he you know, he's making all these low budget horror movies. So of course, like I'm in the conversation for that sometimes, and they're not for me because I just want to make my own type horror movies, you know? And so I rarely read other people's scripts because it's just not what I'm interested in. And I finally came to him and I was like, you know, and he's friends with Ethan and they had done Sinister and The Purge together. And I was like, hey, if I get Ethan, you want to make a Western? And even though it's like the last thing in the world he wants to do. And he was like, no, but if you can get Ethan, maybe. And so I you know, thanks to him, he was like, I'll call Ethan and so I went to New York and met with Ethan and I just pitched him the idea and he really liked it. And I was like, okay, well, you really like the sound of this. I could blow it for you, but I'll go write the script. Like you being this excited is enough for me to go write it on my own. Like if you weren't, I would write a comedy and go do that. But since you're interested, I'll go spend my December writing the script. He was doing Macbeth on Broadway at the time and at Lincoln Center. And I was like, when you wrap, he wrapped like January, the first week of January. I was like, when you wrap, I'm sending you it that night. And he was like, okay. And so I went away, I wrote the script, I sent it to him that night. He liked it. Jason Blum liked it and was like, we're going to make this movie. And I was like, great, let's make it. And that's really how it happened. So in a way, it's this sort of like magical, really easy story. But also you have to look at it like there just wasn't another version of the story. Like it was like if Ethan was like, nah, I would have just been like, great, I'd be talking to you about the comedy that I'm making right now. Because I only like momentum. And to me, it's like, here's an idea for a movie. If no one's on board with it, then I'll make something else. But if you're on board with it, let's go.
Right. And in terms of your writing process, because I've heard you tell similar stories before like that, it seems like it you know, it seems like you don't spend, I don't want to say you don't spend a lot of time on the writing process because obviously you do, but I mean, you get an idea and you just roll with it right away and almost don't think about it too much because a lot of times you put pressure on yourself if you're trying to write something and overthink it. But I feel like you just go with the momentum and just do it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's misleading because, so I wrote this Western in like 3 weeks or something. And so it sounds like, oh, you don't put a lot of time into it. But the misleading part is that's all I did for 3 weeks every day. So where someone else might take 4 months to write a script, they worked once a week here and there for an hour, and then they changed some things. It's when I wake up to when I go to sleep, I don't do anything but work on it. And so it's like this massive outpouring of like creative energy towards it. So in fact, a lot of effort goes into it. It just goes into a very condensed period. And I don't know why I do it that way. It's just the only way it makes sense to me. The long, I work on a little bit here, a little bit here. That I just feel like it'll never get done that way. And so I really just kind of challenge myself to get things finished.
Were there any key Westerns that you drew from that, just that were of interest to you while you were writing?
Tonally, sure. I think most of the, High Plains Drifter and things like that. It's not.
It's a revenge film, right?
Yeah. And it's, the Sergio Leone movies, of course, it's a little wacky, like different than they are, but it's a little oddball, which is exciting for me, is like that was a big part that would just be like, this movie's a little bit goofy. Cool. And that's something I always loved about his films. And, like all the sort of, like Joe Kidd is great, Two Mules for Sister Sarah is great, stuff like that. Unforgiven's great, things like that.
Yeah.
Like it's more like those type movies than it is like Tombstone or something. It's not like that.
Well, it's not an ensemble, right?
No, not really. I mean, it's got a great kind of ensemble cast by itself, but it's you're following Ethan through the movie.
And then what about John Travolta? Now, I'm just curious because as a filmmaker, you've worked with a lot of good actors, a lot of interesting indie actors, and then also people like Mary. But like working with people like Travolta who have just had so much experience and have been around, is it a different kind of game, or like how did you approach it any differently, or?
No. And maybe it's just because I lucked out with Ethan and John and they're cool. But I think like because I wrote and directed the movie, and because when I met them, I really feel like they both came to be in my movie in a way. So it didn't really feel like, oh, there was this project and they found a director and I'm him and everyone's it was like the whole thing came out of my brain. So when they showed up, they came with like their A game to do what they do. And I was like, what you do is why you're here. So I don't really have any desire to change what you're doing outside of really minuscule thoughts. And I think for them, that's great because the freedom that their choices are their choices. And I'm not trying to stop them unless I'm like, if we do this here, we can't do it later. And then they'd be like, right. Like it was, I very mellow direction for them. It's just more like context of the whole movie kind of thing, not heavy character stuff. Cause I feel like they already got that. And as far as working with them, like, no, I mean, they're both like really nice people, which is huge. I mean, I guess like, I also feel like I vet people pretty well before like if I had met them and felt like, oh my God, they're assholes, but they're not, they're great. And it's cool to, it's really interesting to sit down and do a scene with John Travolta and like you kind of disconnect from it because it's your words and you're doing so many things. But then when I was editing it, I would look at like the weird close-ups of John Travolta and be like, wow, this is weird.
It's John Travolta.
Yeah. But he was great.
Dude, what about vetting you though? Were they either of them familiar with your work or did they have to look anything up to
I don't
trust
know.
That you could do it?
We didn't really talk about it. I mean, I figure like
they're there. They showed up, right?
If they can go find out about me, I didn't feel the need to sort of justify myself in that regard, but and maybe in meeting me, they were talking to me in a way, excuse me, that they were trying to figure me. I don't know. Right. It just wasn't of interest to me. It was sort of like, I kind of just come with who I am. So yeah, I think maybe like on day one or something, but like it went fine. You know what I mean? Like it was, if anything, it was just like, it's a fast moving thing, but they were all cool with that. And it was a great, I don't want to say it was the best cast ever because then it like, makes it sound like the other people I work with. It's not, and that's not what I mean. But like, John Travolta, Ethan Hawke, James Ranson, Karen Gillan, Thaisa Farmiga, like we all, I mean, Larry's in it.
The one from Oculus, the redhead from Oculus, she's really good in that.
We all just were like, we all like each other. And so every day it was like, this is fun. And this will like all the difficulties that come with it are not so bad because we like being here. And that's not always the case, but I think a lot of that is like making sure you get the right people. Cause I think 85% of directing is just casting anyway. Yeah. And that's, you cast the right people and then
Woody Allen would say 100%.
Yeah,
so you're giving 15% to yourself.
No. Well, yes, because I do so many jobs, but I would say that like it's 10% editing, and 5% directing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
I kind of wanted to go back to the beginning. I mean, obviously, I'm looking forward to a new film, but we always love talking about, filmmakers and guests, their love of film, where it all begins. For us, obviously, we have so many stories about, the local video store where we, look at box covers and discover it. We also grew up in the age of HBO and cable, where we were seeing certain films 100 times in a row. What was it for you? What do you remember kind of early on being the thing that captured your fascination with films?
It's all the same things, really. I mean, I think like, I remember, I don't remember, I feel like Raiders of the Lost Ark was the first movie that I was like really sort of blown away by in a way that I was like, this is so cool. And then when you would go to the video store, it was like always trying to like chase that experience again. And then like, of course, the box covers were so exciting. They looked like every movie was going to be better than that, and rarely were they. But I don't know, it's one of those things is like, I just latched on to, as an art form, movies, and I was just really interested in them. And I was trying to get as much of them as I could, and really trying to see like what else is out there, because like, I really like this and I want to see if there's something else I like this much. So it was really just this kind of like, almost like addiction to be like, oh, I had such an amazing experience watching this movie one time that like, I've got to be able to have that again. And to this day, it's always still kind of what I'm searching for. And it's like, I don't watch as many of these movies as I used to, but I watch a lot of movies like in the hopes of being really, and the most recent, I got that feeling with Force Majeure and with Boyhood are the two movies I've had recently. Like I saw them both pretty recently. And they were both like really kind of great experiences seeing movies. But in general,
did you see Boyhood before you had worked with Ethan, or
no?
After?
It came out when we were shooting, and when we wrapped, I figured like the first thing I'll do is go home and see it. And I wasn't Ethan'd out, but I was like, the momentum of like, wow, Boyhood came out thing had like the zeitgeist of it had died down. Mm-hmm. So it felt like the wrong time to watch it, because I was like, oh, I'm seeing it just to catch up. And I was like, I feel like it's too special of a movie in a way, because of just the nature of what it is. That I was like, it's going to come back around for me, whether it comes back around of me watching it at home by myself or whatever, but it came back around in a really great way that the, maybe it was the DGA, I don't know. Someone was doing a screening, and like Tarantino did a Q&A, and it was just like, it was like 10 in the morning on a Sunday, which is like rarely the time you feel like going to watch a movie. But, it ended up being like a really like special time to see it, and then to like reconnect with Ethan and everything. So it worked out that way.
And his character's journey is the one I could identified with and thought was almost the most amazing to watch, because he started as an artist and at rock and roll and ends up father, and it's just a fascinating. It's a
pretty incredible movie, because what it ultimately could have been was a YouTube video.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. There's the gimmick that the project is this like experiment of what's going to happen over these 13 years. And it could have just been like, that's it. That's the most interesting. But in fact, that's the least interesting part of the movie, is like the fact that they did it. Really, when you're watching the movie, is meaningless, because there actually is a really poignant, touching, and like valid story about human connection throughout the movie. Yeah. That's way better than, I don't want to say than I thought it would be, but it's just like, I thought the gimmick was going to be more of a thing, and it's so not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the early days, though, with horror especially, was it early interest in horror? Or was it just all sorts of films, like action films? Like, when did the horror... Because I think we're all different, whether it's super young, when we see an image we're not meant to see. I'm always curious where that always sparks.
Yeah, I think there's an element of like the stuff you're not supposed to watch was always interesting to me. And like the visceral feeling that like, oh, I watched the movie and it made me like upset was like a fascinating thing in a way. And it's one of the only art forms I think that would do that would make me nuts. Like, you wouldn't see, like, I guess you could see a horrible photo and do that, but this was like before the internet, so that wasn't really a thing that happened, like unless you really searched it out. But like, you could watch a movie and there'd be some scene, even if it didn't have to be a horror movie, but something could happen that would be upsetting, and it could make you not sleep, or it could be like burnt into your brain and you couldn't get rid of it. And on the one hand, you could just be like, I don't want to ever do that again. But for me, that was oddly, like, was just really fascinating. And then it became this thing of like, well, if this movie got me like that, is there something worse out there? And I wanted to like test my limits on what it is. And then as far as making horror movies, I wouldn't say it's an accident, but it's like, I think the movies that I connected with because where I'm from, nobody makes movies. And certainly in like the 80s and 90s compared to, I mean, there's no iMovie, there was no, like now it's like with YouTube and iMovie and things like that, almost everyone can kind of wrap their head around what some form of movie making is. Right. But when I was growing up, it was a thing people in Hollywood did. That's just what it was, you know? And I think that like when I would watch these low budget horror, like Bad Taste or something like that, I could see like, oh, I see how he's doing this. And then it made it not something someone in New Zealand, but it just wasn't like, oh, this foreign thing that I didn't get born into and I don't know how to do. It was like, well, I could put a camera on a car also. Right. You know what I mean? I could do this also.
Because Hollywood films are so polished, you don't see the stitching. You don't see an endpoint that you could actually create that because it's so well made.
Yeah, in the same way that like I was like playing in bands and I was into like punk rock bands, and the idea of like pop music seemed foreign. It seemed something that like somewhere someone else does. But like punk music's whole vibe is this like do it yourself vibe. And that to me was like, oh, well, I could do it myself. I could just do it. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm good or not, but it doesn't matter. I could just do it. And that really like resonated with me. And so when you would see these low budget horror movies or just B movies in general, it was that DIY thing, whether it was like a B movie ripoff of some Hollywood movie or if it was a B movie horror movie, it was like, oh, this is like, they don't have the resources, but fuck it. You know what I mean? And I connected to that. So that to me was, made sense and made me feel confident that I could maybe do it. And then in the 90s, this sort of independent film boom happened, which took that same mentality, but the movies were not your typical B movies, you know. I guess you would now call them like art films, but like it wasn't like a cheap version of Godzilla. It was like a movie about people doing something. So it became this. What was so interesting to me about that was not only were they low budget movies that people were making, they were about things that were directly counterintuitive of what studio movies were. So when this independent film boom happened and you went to see those movies, it was really because the other options out there were not that. And what I struggle with now is I feel like the independent film world, which is, I guess, in a way bigger than ever, is really fallen on the majority scale into like people trying to make low budget studio movies, either A, because it's just a cheaper way to do it, or to get noticed so that they can make studio movies. And so for me, I feel there's this missing thing in cinema right now where it's like, I'm like, this guy just made this movie so that they would hire him to do that movie. Right. I can feel it. You know what I mean? And it feels like I'm calling bullshit on it. Or this movie is just a way to make, it should have been a $25 million movie, but they made it for $1 million just because then it would make more money, and they found somebody that just wanted to make movies so bad they could do it, and I can feel that in it. And what's not there is this like voice of a filmmaker that's like truly passionate about something, and that's why a movie like Boyhood or Force Majeure like connect with me, because I go, I feel that passion of the filmmaker giving a shit, and giving a shit beyond just what people think of it, like giving a shit about what they're trying to say. And
what were some of the horror films like that? Like, I mean, obviously Larry's Habit, I'm going to guess, because for us, that was...
For sure.
Were there other ones from that period that you remember that? Because I remember The Addiction I liked as well. But those kind of films that seem to be like about real life, but happen to have horror elements coming through into the stories.
I should probably be able to recall a million, but you know, it's weird. It doesn't necessarily connect as much with horror, because horror is such a always commercial genre that generally people who are doing it, like Larry was someone who was like, I love horror. I want to make my art horror movies, or B movies with A ideas, as he would say. But other people, they're like, oh, horror movies is a great way that's a great picture to make money with, or that's a way to get into the industry. Right. So it's a fine line of that. So they're out there. You know, this is certainly for not, I Let the Right One In a way, has that vibe where it feels like, it's a horror movie, but the guy was on to something else more important for him, you know? And so the horror is just a background in it. And of course, movies like The Shining and Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist and things like that, they're the movie first and then they're the horror movie.
Often I mentioned on the show that a lot of those best horror films from that period were made by non-horror directors. Guys who were just great filmmakers who had to make that
because the genre is just like the setting. It's not the whole focus. And that to me is really important. But I do realize that's an esoteric take on it. But that is, you know, when people make horror movies like that, I'm the first one in line. When people make just regular horror movies, I really don't see them that much anymore.
Yeah. Have you been approached to make sequels to things that you didn't even make?
Yeah, most of the ones that get made, I've been in the mix.
Wow.
And it doesn't mean I would have gotten it. It just means like I'm on a list somewhere. They're like, that guy made a movie in a house. We have a movie in a house. Get him on the phone, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Were there any along the way that you were potentially excited about? That yeah, I mean, I know that's a terrible question, but for example, I mean, for a long time there was the rumor that you might tackle like something like Funhouse, like with Eli producing, which I was like, all right, I could see Ty doing a version of Funhouse, I guess. Was that any truth to that, or did that go any far, or was it just
not really? I mean, it's like I remember Eli and Eric Newman, who produced the Sacrament. When they first started a company, they were like, we're going to do Funhouse. And I was like, I'd be into that. That's just all. They didn't go any further than that. Yeah. And they were like,
yeah. For 10 years.
Yeah. It wasn't. I mean, but that was about it. I was really pretty close on the Poltergeist remake.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask if it was okay if I brought that up, because I saw you when you were... because I share the office with.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I saw it was the most exciting thing, getting to work at 8:30 a.m. and seeing on the sign-in sheet Sam Raimi, Rob Tappert, Ty West. And I'm like, whoa, that's kind of cool. And I saw you on your way out, and that's when I heard it was for Poltergeist, which I thought was a really great fit.
Right after Innkeepers, was it?
I don't know when it was. No, okay. It wasn't that. I was editing the Sacrament.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then I remember a week later they announced the Monster House guy, which
it was going to be me or him. It was down to the two of us.
Wow.
Yeah. He's a better choice for it, because I don't know if I was fully into it. Mm-hmm. I was into Sam Raimi.
Yeah,
and I was into the script already existed. You couldn't write it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you had carte blanche to write it,
it's very much an example of, and I say the last time, but it probably won't be, but it's very much the last time I went, I don't really have an interest in being a director for hire on movies. On TV I do, but on movies I don't. And because I get too involved, and it's just like, I can't compartmentalize it. On a TV show I can, because it's already been created, and I'm here to just I can help, and I understand my role. Whereas in a film form that starts from the beginning and goes through, it's very hard for me to not be attached to everything. It's just not in my DNA for it. So I thought, well, this is a Sam Raimi movie, and it's a remake that's going to happen that might be interesting, and it's a big opportunity, as people always like to say. So let me see how far I can get with it. And I got farther than I thought I was going to get, which was, it was down to me and Gil. As far as I know, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And, I don't know that. I think he's probably a better... I mean, it would have just been a different movie for sure. But I wasn't... I mean, I was a little bummed when they were like, they're going with him, but I was also relieved, But it's a good group of people making that movie. And then the funny thing is that my friend Jane Addams ended up being in the movie, which is great. And I was like, the good thing is I don't think I would have cast you. So I'm glad it worked out.
She lucked out.
But yeah, I look forward to seeing it, especially because Jane's in it. So, and I'm sure Gil seems like a great guy, and there's good people involved. I'm sure it'll be a fun movie.
Yeah. Wow. What about the early days of Glass Eye Pix and kind of hooking up with them? Because Larry told us the story that I think he knew, was it a teacher of yours or something? And he knew somebody from school, and you were the only other person that knew the movie Habit or something along those lines, and they put you in touch with him. Is that sort of accurate?
Yeah. What it was is my first year in film school, this woman named Kelly Reichard was teaching, and she was teaching my film production class, which is like homeroom for lack of a better term. And Kelly, I don't think she'd ever taught before at the time, and she had made a movie called River of Grass that Larry produced, and acted in, and edited as well, I believe. And she would always bring in, she was just like a filmmaker, so that was really cool to me. And she's a cool lady, and she would bring in like Todd Haynes, just people she was friends with, and they would come talk to us, and it was like really interesting to me. And I don't know that it connected with the rest of the kids the way she wanted it to, but her and I got along really well. And then one day she mentioned Habit, and I was the only one who'd seen it, and she was like, well, he was part of I'll bring him in. And I just kept bugging her, like, when are you going to bring that guy in? And eventually she's like, dude, nobody cares. Here's his phone number. So I called him, and we went and had coffee, and I think we talked about like Unbreakable had just come out.
Yeah.
And he was in post-production on Wendigo. And other than Kelly, he was the only filmmaker I'd ever met. And we just got along. We just stayed in touch. And then I showed him my short films over the years, and he liked them. And then, at some point he was doing a DVD for No Telling and asked me to be I don't know, I was an intern. And I just, while I was there, I was helping do whatever I had to do. Which could be everything from logging tapes to like cleaning his house, and it was all good. And then I had shown him a short film that I made that started getting into film festivals, and I didn't know anything about that. So when he says that I made him work, I would be like, hey, I need to make VHS tapes, and I don't know how to do that. Like I don't, like I guess I could go spend a bunch of money that I don't have somewhere doing it, but I don't. And I was like, you have the setup right here to make like 10 dubs and I just need 10 dubs. So I would like, while I was doing something, I'd be running off dubs of my short film and things like that. But I learned so much from that because I would see all his early stuff and I'd be like, well, I could go down to Chinatown and I could buy clamshell cases for 99 cents. I could get Graham Rezek, who's better at Photoshop than me, to design a really cool cover, and he was in the movie, and like put it in there, and then we can make VHS tapes and put labels on them, and they'll look like a real movie. Yeah. And then that's all we did, and then I would just send that out, and because it looked like a real movie, people watched it, and then they were like, "Oh, it's okay." And so then I got into some festivals, and the thing about that was interesting is that, you know, when I was in film school, no one said submit to film festivals. I don't know. I just did it and I got in, and then that gave me like a fucked up sense of confidence. And so I just thought like, well, I'll send it to more. I'll just do this. And so like I would go to LA. I would go to the film festivals wherever they were. And I didn't know what I was getting out of it, but I just knew like, well, it got vouched for and it got in places. And so it made me think like, maybe there's something to this, you know. Before it was something I was doing and I believed in it, but it was very helpful to have someone like Larry say, no, it's pretty good. And then have it get in somewhere and be like, huh, like, I guess all you got to do is do it, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, he's one of my filmmaking heroes in general. And just,
I can count on one hand the people that are incredibly influential in my life, both as just like helpful people and then just amazing, inspirational people. And it's, you know, in a way it begins and ends with Larry, and there's really no one quite like him. And I feel very unbelievably fortunate to have met him, not just when I did, but just in general. And in a way, it's also made it very difficult to navigate through the film world because there are not other people like him. And he exemplifies everything about independent film and film, being a filmmaker and an artist, that he is that personified. And so to go meet other people who aren't that is a real downer.
Mm-hmm. And he's in your new film?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. That's fun.
I always need more Larry.
It's a good role. Yeah, no, he's great in it.
It was the worst thing. I saw that new show, The Strain, and I turned it on, and he's in like one scene, and you're like, oh no, that guy should have been a lead. I would have watched Larry as a lead in a show.
He's not the lead, but he's got some great moments.
Stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he's tailor made to be in a Western.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
What about, in the last couple of years, you've kind of popped up in front of the camera in a few things. Obviously, you're next, and some
a lot of people want to know about how you built the character of Tariq and the lines of underground cinemas.
Well, I will credit all of the Tariqness to Simon Barrett, who when I ultimately said I'll be in the movie and they didn't change the name, I was like, that's bold, because it was written as like an Arab guy named Tariq, right? Yeah. And I got there and was like, I'm sure. And then they gave me the wardrobe, which was the scarf and everything. Yeah. I was like, oh, it's a comedy. I get it now. Yeah. And then
it really is a comedy. Until towards the end. It stops being a comedy at the end. But really, when you guys are all in it together, it's a comedy.
Yeah. I wasn't really aware of that. I read probably 3/4 of the script, which is always a joke. I didn't read the script. I was like, well, I die. And I was like, I just assume watch the movie. You know what I mean? I don't want to. Yeah. So I was like, I know I'm not going to come back. So I got part of the way through and went, well, I'll just see the movie. It'll be more fun. Yeah, the wardrobe was outrageous. I was like, oh, I see what this is now. And then the dinner table scene was a really, really, really long amount of improvisation. I don't remember what was in the script. It was bare bones. I was a filmmaker in a documentary. I think the Cleveland Underground Film Festival, I believe, was in the script, but it was like, oh, okay. And that was it. And then Joe, they just were like, well, riff on it. And Joe started his whole thing about commercial. And then I started the whole thing, like, do you show it and it just went. And we did
so
that.
Meta because Joe's the one.
Of course. Yeah.
Everything he's leveling at you is what he gets.
Well, that's what we were after, so we just started going and went on forever. I can't imagine. It must have been miserable editing that because we went on we probably 11 takes that were 5 minutes long of just us talking shit about just like film festival nonsense. Like it got really, I remember at one point it got so bizarre that it was like the award that the Cleveland Underground Festival was like old LeBron statues. Like it got really weird.
Because that and the Sacrament are the best two perform. In my opinion, the best two things Joe's been in.
Yeah,
and even including his own work.
Joe is really, really good.
He's hilarious in Your Next. He's probably the funniest thing in it.
Him and AJ is like nonstop.
But he's really good in Sacrament. And did you cast him after? Because you had acted together and you kind of got a vibe for what he would bring? I
mean, yes, but no, not because of that. Yeah. Not because of just being in Missouri with him. But I've just known Joe since 2005. We, when the Roost was at South by Southwest, so was Kissing on the Mouth, and we met then.
Oh, wow.
And we really stayed in contact the whole way through. And and I had done so much with Joe, and Joe is another person that I have like such a tremendous sort of respect for in all facets of what he does. And I wrote the role with him in mind, but it wasn't because like I saw him in the turtleneck being funny and was like, oh, I didn't know. It's like I've been collaborating with Joe for 10 years at that point. So,
and he's actually the camera operator too, right? Throughout.
I think I did most of it, but when I didn't, it was him for sure. Yeah, he did it. I mean, he did a fair amount. Definitely, that would be like, it was great that he was doing it, not just like any actor in a way that like it was not confusing for him to use the camera.
Yeah. Well, my question about your next was like, do you like doing the acting thing, or is that more of a fate? Like people ask, oh, can you do this for me?
I'm fortunate that Your Next and Drinking Buddies turned out so well. So yeah, I do, but I don't have any confidence doing it. Like it's not something that I have any aspirations to do. And I've been asked to do it a couple of times and I say no, but it's like if Joe asked me to be in a movie, I would always say yes. I guess if Adam did too, I would say yes. But it's one of those things that it's not something that I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I would have to feel really safe about doing it. And when I was like, all right, it's a couple lines with Joe and Amy and AJ at a table, like I can handle that and not ruin your movie. Because I was like, dude, I'll ruin your movie. Like you don't want me to, I'm not a good actor. And then I had done Joe's movie Silver Bullets, which was more of an experience than really a performance. And then Drinking Buddies. And I remember when I watched a rough cut of Drinking Buddies, I was like, here are my notes. Take me out of the movie. I was like, there's just too much Dave in this movie. But of course, after like I get noticed on this, like people go, hey, you were in Drinking Buddies. Like that happens to me, which is crazy. And that's funny. And that's a funny thing and like a fun thing. So that's been a fun experience from Drinking Buddies.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you can comment on this. A lot of the recommendations that we've been making, especially in the last year, it's interesting how the landscape of independent film and horror films has changed and how we find things. And now with VOD, a lot of our listeners saw The Sacrament on VOD, for example. So, what are kind of the pros and cons or advantages? Since you started out trying to get films in theaters, obviously, and people to see them that way. And now there's like a whole new way for people to kind of find your work. Is it a good thing, a bad thing, a little bit of both?
I think for me, the state of where we're at with cinema in America is weird. I think it's not very focused and not very interesting. So I think that, yeah, movies are meant to be seen on a big screen with loud sound in an environment, generally with the public. I suppose the public part is to me the least important. But like, you spend a lot of time meticulously crafting a movie to be seen a certain way, and if it's going to end up being seen on an iPhone only, you would approach that very differently. So when you approach a movie to be very cinematic, like I went and saw Interstellar at the IMAX Chinese thing, and I don't particularly connect with his movies. I'm interested in them, but for some reason, they don't quite click with me. And Interstellar was the same. It was like, I enjoyed watching it, but for some reason I have a weird disconnect with him. But to go there and to see that it's early on 70 millimeter and the director's been here to approve it, and to have a guy in a suit come out and say, everyone, welcome to Interstellar. Like, that's what it's about. Like everybody there was like, we're here for this thing. We all want to be a part of this thing. And whether you like the movie or not, like there's a reverence to it and there's an experience to it. And the fact that it's like, okay, that's great that it happens for Christopher Nolan, and it will happen for Quentin Tarantino, I'm sure, for the next one. But like, why is it only for them? Yeah. And it's like, is the question because people don't want it, or is it the question that like there are movies that don't warrant it and people don't think they warrant it? And I think that pageantry that he got with this movie, good or bad, to me, as like a lover of cinema, like you go to the movies to see like a close up of someone's talking head on a giant screen because it's the only medium where that can exist. You can't see that any other way. So to not have that, or to go to the movies and get commercials, and even the Interstellar was like, there will be no trailers before. And I was like, wow, all of this is presented in a very respectful manner. And then you'll go to like a multiplex and it's commercials and no one gives a shit. And it's just sort of like, I get it. It's a place for teenagers to go on the weekend. I was there too. But it's like, that reverence of cinema just people don't care on a whole anymore. And so that's hard. So now the upside to that is like, okay, we'll just skip that and we'll go to independent theaters, which there are so few of now, which is hard. It was better, even when I made House of the Devil, there was 10 times more indie theaters. When I made The Roost, there was 30 times more. So, there's the Sundance Cinemas here, which is in a way kind of the best theater in LA, but it's like, it struggles for attendance, I'm sure. And it's like, but it's great, But for the most part, a lot of these indie movies that take chances, the people who put the movies in the multiplexes aren't interested in taking chances. And even though they're playing Interstellar to an empty theater, like one full house and 2 empty houses, and you could put any movie in there, they're not going to. You know, they're not going to put force majeure in there. They just don't want, that's not their business model. So you end up with this indie theater thing, which is shrinking. And I think is really the duty of people who like movies like ourselves to go and like support them because they will be gone. Or there's VOD. And VOD is great because it goes right to the people. And I like watching a movie at home just as much as anybody else. I have a 70-inch TV. That helps. It's cool. I've got 5.1, all that shit. And it's not so expensive to have that anymore. So it's reasonable that the home watching environment is not like some little 4x3 TV disaster. Like, you know, like in someone's kitchen with the VHS thing built in. Like that's what it was for a while. And so the fact that it's not that is good. But there is a disposableness to the movie. Like there's nothing better than Netflix Instant. But it's also the worst thing ever because it's disposable. Yeah. So there's nothing better than being like, oh, I just watched like the Sacrament on Netflix Instant is the best thing that could ever happen to that movie because it requires no effort for people to see it. But it also creates this mentality of I'll watch 2 minutes, I'll stop and watch something else, and I'll do other things, but it's so not important that it's disposable.
And it feels free.
Yes.
Even though you are paying a month, you feel like everything.
Exactly. So you try a little bit of that, try a little bit of that, and it's creating a mindset for movies that to me is very counterproductive to what I think the goal should be. And that scares me a little bit.
It could also, the scary thing about something you said that definitely triggers something in my mind is it could also change film language because like you were talking about the close-up, but really the one that's going to be affected is exactly what you use in a Western.
The wide shots, yeah.
And shots of the beautiful American landscape, Monument Valley, things like that would have no place on an iPhone, on a iPad, and even really on a television of a smaller 70, you'd be fine.
You won't be fine, but just something.
But the idea of cinema being bigger than us. I remember reading once Walter Murch, the greatest editor on Earth, he would put...
who, by the way, would be the greatest editor on Earth, and all of his editing techniques are absolutely counterproductive to the way every movie now is being edited.
Right, yeah, exactly. He would take on the screen that he's editing, if he's editing at home, he would cut out little paper figures of people and he'd put it right under the screen. Like little, it makes, it looks bizarre. And he said it's because he had to never forget about scale. He said, I have to remember people are watching this on a big screen and this is how small they are. And I want to keep that in mind when I put these shots together. I'm like, it's really interesting. But I think now I'm like, Jesus, are we going to see the language itself shift to smaller views of things just because we know that people don't need that shot?
You do. Look at every TV show. It's just close-ups of people talking. That's all it is. There's nothing else. But because it's like, that's the in people's mind, it's the easiest, it's the most direct way to communicate the story, like the plot.
Right. Which is the opposite of visual storytelling.
Yeah. And so like, visual storytelling, you get something like Under the Skin.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't fully connect with that movie, but I still think that movie's amazing.
Special,
You know what I mean? Like I would put that in my top 10 of the year, even though I don't enjoy it that much. It's like, this is why I go to the movies.
The weird thing is I don't think you're meant to enjoy it though.
No, I don't either.
Like I loved it in the sense that I know it's brilliant and but I couldn't say I love it because it's about the
I don't
lack
even know
of
if
love.
I don't know if I think it's brilliant. I just think it's like, that's what I go to the movies to see.
Right,
it's like
an experience.
There's no one other than Jonathan Glazer could make that movie.
With an A-list star right now.
So it's fascinating to see that,
Yeah, and that's what we were giving Becca crap about it last week because she was, he was like, I know you weren't paying attention. You were watching it at home on a TV.
Well, and this is the thing we're talking about is I don't necessarily trust how people watch movies anymore.
Exactly, because
of how they can watch movies.
Well, it's interesting in terms of The Sacrament. I saw it on the big screen a couple times, and I loved that experience. But I thought you had said you saw it at home.
It might be the only movie I've seen in the last couple of years that I felt might play stronger directly as a one-on-one relationship with a viewer because it's meant to be a vice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique movie in that it's meant to be that.
Right.
So, it was the one movie that I was less adamant about. I mean, I tried with compositions and things like that to make the movie visually interesting,
it's still
but
cinematic. It
was almost more designed for a small screen than it was for a theatrical experience. I think the Western I'm making is the polar opposite, but like The Sacrament was, and in a weird way, it was kind of when I was done with The Sacrament, the thing I wanted to get the farthest away from is like, I knew I was sort of making a new age, new media movie that felt almost better suited for the small screen. And when I finished it, I was like, I'm very proud of this and I will never do this again.
Wow.
Because I felt like it's everything I wanted to be out of that movie. And I'm probably most proud of that movie of any of my movies, but I felt like it was ultimately a sidestep of what I really love about movies. I feel like I got a little too clever for myself a little bit.
I wanted it to be released on HBO as a Vice presentation, and just like with the right labeling, and this is how you're going to watch it.
I thought that would have been great.
It would have been perfect. You know what? I want to, get your response, and it's finally something I've been meaning to ask you about the Innkeepers all these years. I've brought it up a ton of times on the show, and I love it. It was the film I saw I guess whatever the first LA screening of it was, and it was the film that really made me appreciate your filmography, because I liked House of the Devil. I saw The Roost when it came out. I thought it was pretty good. But when I saw The Innkeepers, I was just like, I loved it, but I was like, oh man, Ty's 4 or 5 movies into his career, and they're all so different. They're like, I mean, I know they're made by you, but they're all different and unique. You haven't really made the same movie twice. I defend The Innkeepers a lot because, people, I think, don't fully get the ending. And the thing I remember, and this is mild spoiler territory if you're listening and haven't seen the movie, but the distinct memory I have was the ghost shot, which is the very last shot of the movie. And when I saw it on the big screen, super obvious. It was right there. I noticed it.
I wouldn't say it's super obvious, but it's easier to see for sure.
To see. And then anybody that's seen it, most of the people I talk to have seen it at home on Blu-ray or whatever. And when I mentioned that, like, I don't understand what you're talking about. It's like, but that makes the whole movie, that one shot kind of makes it all obvious. So I was like, I put on the Blu-ray, and for a second I was like, wait, did he take it out? And I had to go back and rewatch it and really look for it. Yeah. So, is there any difference between when you screened it on the big screen and when it came out, or is it just because I saw it on a giant
just the
screen?
Reality of the benefits of seeing it on a big screen. But the funny thing about that too is, like, I don't care if anybody sees it, because that to me is the whole sort of thesis of the movie, is like the argument that you're having about the ghost and then being like, it's not there. It's like, that's what it's all about, is someone who believes in ghosts and someone who doesn't believe in ghosts. Mm-hmm. So it's not an accident that it's so subtle you can barely see it. I'm like, I have eyes. I know how hard I made it to see. It's like, I could have made it way more obvious. I didn't, because it's like, I almost want way more people not to see it than do see it, because it's like, that's the whole thing, is like, are they real? Are they not real? And it's so subtle that it's not, and then it becomes this sort of weird argument of like, well, no, it was because of the ghost, and therefore the whole story is about the ghost. And so it's like, I didn't see it, so no, she's just crazy. And like, that's what, to me, like, when people talk about ghosts and shit, or even like religion, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, you seem very confident in it, but there's no evidence, and so it's a weird, that's why it's so subtle. It's not a matter of like, I don't know what it would be a matter of, but that's the point of it is not that
because I started at the Downtown Independent. I don't know how early that was with you when you were there, and I didn't see it.
Interesting.
And I remember liking that, because I felt like I was seeing this empty space, and you're looking for something, like you're trying to believe.
I mean, it's
like
also,
a character.
Yeah, and I would also say that, like, I am of the in the non-disposable film format. Like, for me, I make movies that you should see more than once. And I think that there are a lot of layers that you will not get out of the first viewing of any of my movies. And maybe that's short-sighted, but to me, that's exciting. Like, I like when I go back and watch movies and realize stuff I didn't ever notice before. So that, my movies are full of stuff like that. And then shot's one of them. Like, even if someone has to tell you that, like, there's actually a thing in the shot, in pause, however you want to do it, I don't care. It's not up to me. Like, you take away from the movie whatever you want. I had my own experience in the movie. So, that's just what makes the movie interesting, is that debate. Or like, if you go back and you go frame by frame, okay, what other movies do you get to do that for? Yeah. What movies do you get to put on pot and go frame by frame to look at something for? You don't do that in like the Winter Soldier. Whatever that movie's about is right there. You know what I mean? So I'm not comparing it. I'm just saying, like, there's something interesting about, like, it has a life beyond just the watching it once, And
we were talking about the comedy of your next, but like the comedy is, I think the first half of The Innkeepers is really funny. I think it's great chemistry between the characters. So you were talking about making a comedy. What kind of comedy, if you were just making, when you say straight comedy, like that, there's so many subgenres from the rom-com to, what kind of comedy would you make if it was just from start to finish a comedy?
Well, the movie that I'm probably going to make is sort of in the vein of like After Hours.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Something like that.
Bad Day, Burbs, all those kind of movies.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a little bit of a rom-com, but it's oddball.
Have you seen Into the Night with Jeff Goldblum? It's not as good as After Hours, but it's that exact subgenre.
I don't know. It's, like Mystery Date's another classic, like those kind of movies. It'll be like in that sort of, that universe.
That's a good thing. After Hours,
Miracle Mile, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. That's good stuff.
What I've become interested in with, there's this weird trend in movies that I like despise, and it's like here to stay, is like I see it when I hear certain actors talk about like ridiculous, or like when people are like, you know, like Christopher Nolan's Batman's so great because it's like grounded, and it's like, it's not grounded. It's about fucking Batman. What are you talking about? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But like, it's just grounded. It's like, you don't know what this means. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. So to me, like that idea of like some form of like reality being so heavily put into movies, I'm not interested in it. That's why a movie like Under the Skin is inspiring to me. Right. Or a movie like The Double was inspiring me this year. Or like in a way, Force Majeure is off of that a little bit in that, you know, I think cinema doesn't have to be this replication of real life. It can be, but we've become so obsessed with it that everyone's feelings about movies are, well, that didn't seem realistic. And that's what it's like. Well, nothing in most movies that we really love seem that realistic. Like,
well, this is something I know you were wanting to talk about is the 80s. And and of the films we all basically fell in love with in the 80s, none of them feel realistic. I mean, they feel realistic to how you want life to be, but not how life actually looks and feels, you know?
Yeah, but you know,
Teen Wolf onwards.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, I know Ty's a big Teen Wolf fan, and me and AJ have had long conversations about it. It's just, there's something about the craft of filmmaking back then, and I have to credit AJ to this argument because it's true. We always talk about that scene in Teen Wolf where you know, Scott and Booth are walking down the street talking about when he ran away over, and it's this beautiful long tracking shot in the story, and it's all done in one take, and you're just thinking like, this is a silly movie about a kid that turns into a werewolf, yet everyone showed up to work that day and took the job seriously and made something. And you know what I mean? And
but you look at all the John Hughes films, and that runs through all of his work.
You know, no matter how silly a premise, it was like a lot of these movies from the 80s that we grew up with, you know, they all gave a shit, at least, you know, about the quality of the work.
But they're also, and a lot of them did exactly the opposite of what you're saying has invaded cinema now. It didn't seem like they cared about it. It was more about the fantastic, and yet they felt real. They felt like how we wanted life to feel as kids and young people. And I think there's a quality that's been the big, I think, demarcation between then and now. I think even though there's still great movies, and I thought Blue Ruin was fantastic, but most movies are just, just trying to be like, this is what life is.
Yeah,
right
but
now.
I think that even though the 80s was a very commercial time, I think that now is a, like the motivation for most movies now is that they be liked by people that see them. And I get it, but it's also like that means you're making a movie for the people that are coming to see its taste and not your own. So you're not really leaving it's weird. Like then the audience should all be making movies if that's what we're doing. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like the movies aren't being made to make the best movie. It's to make the most likable movie. And when you do that, it becomes very generic feeling. And so you would be like, we got to cut this scene because a couple of people got bored with them walking down the street and they just wanted to see werewolves. And it's like, you can't argue with that because there's probably a piece of paper that showed that the majority of people in the room said that. But like, who cares? They don't make movies. They come to see them. Like, you don't tailor it to them. You know, it's like, you wouldn't go to a museum and be like, I love this painting. If there was a little more blue in it, I'd like it more. And it's like, oh, well, maybe we should put some blue in it. You wouldn't do that. Yeah. But everyone feels connected with movies in a way that they feel very comfortable doing that. And to me, I get it. I'm a filmmaker, so of course I have to feel like very defensive of that. But even if I wasn't, it's just sort of like, I understand the risk of I might not like a movie. I am a grown up. I can pay to go see it. And I know that it might be not quite what I hoped it to be. But like, I'm okay with that. And for me, you know, I think most people, when they go see a movie, they have a preconceived notion of what that movie is in their head based on the advertising. So everybody has an idea of the movie they're going to see. And there are some people, when the movie strays from that preconceived notion in their head, they struggle with it because it's confusing, it's challenging, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward. They just don't like it because they weren't in the mood for whatever. To me, that's the most exciting time when I see a movie that strays to where I didn't go because I get engaged. When it goes to places I think it's going to go, then it's like I'm in my safe world, and that's not what I'm interested in a way. So there's this weird thing where like anything that's sort of different seems to be like frowned upon as like, it didn't work or something like that, where it's like, I don't know why it's being like there's a culmination of what it is or what it isn't. It's like, to me, I go to a movie and I experience what I get and I take away from it what I will. And to me, that's the whole process. And it's not about like, I have to like this because I paid $12. It's like, yeah, it sucks when you hate a movie but it's like, dude, that's the deal. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I've always been confused.
No one's purposely making movies for you to not like.
Yeah, of course. You know? I mean, that's what always confuses me about like the quote unquote testing process, which I never fully understood. And I remember when I first saw The Signal, the other one, the first one.
Yeah.
you know, they were like holding people back afterwards to get notes and stuff. And they had a whole panel of people. And I actually volunteered. I was like, I'd love to talk about this movie. And they're like, did you like it? And I'm like, yeah, I loved it. And they're like, no, we don't need you. And it's just like, oh, wait, so you're getting a bunch of people that didn't like it
to critique,
to ask them, you know, and it's like, but shouldn't you talk to people like me too, to quote it out?
Right.
Now, you know, Rob Zombie had the greatest quote about this where he was talking about, he's like, if you asked me like how Jaws should end when I was 12, why the fuck would I want to tell you? Like, he was like, how can I tell you how to end that movie? You know, it's like, it's fucking Jaws.
Right.
So I don't know.
Do you watch trailers still, or have you given up?
How do you? I mean,
some people. I try to avoid them now.
Oh no, I don't care.
I do.
Yeah,
I don't. It doesn't. I mean, I don't seek them out. You know, I don't know. Like
in the theater, I'll watch.
But the internet's become so different to me. Where my anything movie related generally is if it's on my Twitter feed, I'll notice it. But I don't go to, like I used to go to all the websites.
Right.
All of them. I can't remember the names of all of them, but everything from the horror ones to the whatever ones. And I don't anymore. So it's like, but that's not because I don't care. It's because Twitter changed that for me. So like, I'll look at what I follow, and every once in a while I'll be like, oh, there's a trailer for this movie, you know, and it's a movie I've had my eye on. So yeah, I'll watch this, but I don't dodge them.
Do you watch foreign cinema and kind of stuff that's outside of the horror, like art house stuff? I think of people like
I watch very little horror.
Okay, just some directors who I have thought of when I've watched your work before, like Michael Haneke, some of his films, just the purposefulness of how it's put together. Something like Cachet. I don't know if you've seen that one, but I don't know. I feel like it animates horror sometimes when people are watching things that are just very different from.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, there's very little for me to be gleaned from like a studio horror movie. There just isn't. You know what I mean? Because it's like, not to say that I can't understand why other people are. It's just not. It's not for me. It never has been for me. I mean, when I was a kid, it was, but it hasn't been for me since I've started making movies. Because
do you
I'm
stay
always
on top of them? Do you keep watching them even if you don't? Okay, so
I used to, but I don't anymore. Because it bums me out.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What are you guys know better than I do? Like, what would you say are the best horror movies of this year?
It's been tough.
They're all independent.
Yeah, they're all indie movies.
But that's okay. What are they?
Starry Eyes, I like a lot.
I haven't seen Starry Eyes
It
yet.
Follows. I haven't seen that yet either. I liked It Follows. Starry Eyes. Honeymoon, I liked.
Starry Eyes is out. Is It Follows out yet?
It Follows is just AFI, no. And it might not even be this year. Honeymoon, Under the Skin, but that's not, that's unclassifiable. Yeah. I don't think that's, the only studio one I liked, I was really surprised. I thought Marked One's The Paranormal Activity was actually fun. I liked it more than all the other previous Paranormal Activity films because it was different and it was more playful. I didn't love it. It might not make it top 10.
So since this didn't really pan out, what are the studio horror movies? Like, obviously, like Ouija just happened, but like if we go back from there, like what have been the big successful horror movies of the year?
Of this year, there haven't been.
Yeah,
really,
I mean, it's all been.
I mean, they were
banking. Oculus wasn't a big one, but it was a pickup that was they tried to release big.
Yeah. They tried with Deliver Us from Evil, but we all unanimously didn't really like it. Yeah, that's the thing I was telling him. My quote unquote top 10 this year is going to be really difficult because there's scenes in horror movies.
Well, in fairness, all of the cool movies, from my perspective, come out now. They come out between now and the first of the year.
I've got one that would definitely be top 2, and most people are responding. Babadook.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
But again, it's not from. It's an Australian
foreign film. Yeah.
And Housebound shot in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So
Girl Who Walks Home Alone. At
that
night.
said, for me, you were saying it's going to be hard. For me, I think this is one of the best years in independent horror because I've seen all these just rich, different, kind of interesting voices. But yeah, I can't think of
this. Could be the worst studio horror.
Yeah, compared to like Conjuring.
But then it's like all of those movies that you mentioned, which I haven't seen yet because they're not fully out yet on the Stars. It's like. They're all pretty minor releases.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's just like when you step back and you think about it, it's sort of like, okay, I believe you. And I think if I was going to like any of them, it's going to be that lot of them for sure. But like, man, like no one's putting those out. Like that's harsh.
Yeah.
It's like, that's weird.
Starry Eyes couldn't even get a theater to play it here. We were talking to them last night. They're
they did one
screening in Cinefamily, and they wouldn't packed house. They couldn't get a second screening.
Yeah. I am The Guest. I like The Guest.
And The Guest is a weird hybrid, but that was a very entertaining movie, and that didn't. It kind of
also a limited release. A better release than a super small release, but a limited release. It's like what gets released on a
Ouija
wide
was number
scale.
one. I mean, that's the thing. Ouija went to number one twice, and I don't know a single person who saw it.
Yeah,
like of the horror friends we have, I don't know anyone who went to that movie.
Yeah, I said before with studio horror, it's like I need to hear a lot of word of mouth over the I didn't see The Conjuring for like 3 weeks until everyone I knew was like, oh yeah, it's pretty good, and I was like, all right, great, then I'll go see it.
Yeah,
but it takes a lot to get me out to see.
Well, I mean, what are your favorite movies of the year?
Need like non-horror?
Yeah. Did you see Force Majeure? See it.
I haven't seen that
It's
yet.
And
No.
I wrote that one down for sure.
It's good.
I mean, definitely Boyhood, Life Itself.
Life itself is good, yeah.
Yeah, and I like Jodorowsky's Dune. You know, that's all the stuff. You know, nothing in particular original.
Sure.
A lot of things you've picked up at festivals.
I have seen Magnolia movies.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're all small.
But, and it's weird, and it's like maybe we all have esoteric taste, but
Right.
or maybe that's, I don't know.
That's
You know
where
what I
the
mean? Like the
shifting of
people who
storytelling.
really love movies, like maybe
Yeah.
those are the, like, you know, I can speak from my experience with Magnolia, is like they genuinely putting out movies that they think are great.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting because, you know, I mean, I feel like, especially because we interact a lot with our listeners, and I feel like that's the equivalent of, you know, we used to go to the video store and, you know, comb the covers of the horror section and figure out that's probably pretty cool. That's probably cool. And now, you know, horror fans are always searching for the good stuff, and, you know, sometimes they fail, whatever. But now it's like if Magnolia or IFC Midnight puts something out or whatever, I'll probably give it a shot.
Yeah,
'cause
they
it's
like vouch
probably
for
gonna
it
be
in a way
something
that's,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Did
then
you
I
like
feel
Nightcrawler?
I haven't seen it, but everyone says great. I'm sure.
Yeah, the
I'm sure it's
character,
good.
the
I believe
stuff's
it's good.
really interesting.
Yeah,
that one I wanna
it's
see too.
I've been behind because I've been editing, but that
Yeah.
is on my list to see.
But again, it's not like it's a huge film. I mean, it did actually pretty well
No, it
for
did
a
well.
couple weeks, but
Yeah.
it's not.
But that's a
in terms of-
genuine release. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
Like I
yeah.
feel like that's like maybe they call it a platform release, but that's or like a
Right.
whatever. You know, like the same way like Grand Budapest
Right.
was like it's only 1,000 screens, right? But it could make
Right.
$100 million on 1,000 screens because
Right.
it's its own thing. So there is that world, which I think is a totally fair release for sort of indie movies and things like that. But the big wide release stuff, it's like you do wonder, like for me personally, I just feel like, are they movies or are they just commercials?
Mm-hmm.
They
Right.
feel like commercials to me.
Right.
You know, they don't feel like they have anything really to say. They just feel like there's stuff.
What do you expect with the new film? Like, because obviously you're straddling still between completely
Yeah, yeah.
independent, but with movie stars. So does that change
I
how
don't
you
know.
release
I
a
mean,
film?
I stay in my lane on that stuff. Of course,
Right.
like, hey, put it on 3,000 screens like that.
Right.
And I'll always champion that as hard as I can all the way until whatever we decide on. But
It's not pre-sold. It's not like Magnolia already has it, right? It's
no, I mean,
still
we have a distributor, but,
Okay.
you know, I don't know. Like, I know what theoretically is going to happen, but like,
But
we'll
the
see.
film's
You know.
not done yet.
Yeah. But, and so I always champion the biggest release
Mm-hmm.
possible and then whatever. But like it to me, it's sort of like my job is to make the movie.
Right.
And then in a way it's someone else's job to sell the movie. And then I will chime in, welcomed or not welcomed,
Right.
regardless. But I'm fine staying in my lane on that.
But because of what we're talking about and it being a Western, do you feel like you have to push harder to make sure it does hit a screen and hit screen?
I mean, yeah, well, no, I don't know. It's sort of like one thing at a time. But like, yeah, it would be a bummer to never be in a I mean, if the only theaters it plays is a festival thing, yeah, sure, that's disappointing. But do I feel it's because of the movie, or do I feel because it's the climate that we're in?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the other option would just be the movie didn't exist at all. So
And I know you love film. Did you shoot on film?
yeah,
16 or 35?
yeah.
So if you get a 35 print, you can show it at the New Beverly.
Yeah.
You'll be in that rare group who are still allowed to show your
I've
movie.
been thinking a lot about that whole sort of, and maybe Tarantino's getting bolder with it. I wish he would get really bold. I think that the really cool future of movies would be if movies that are shot on film are never released on any digital format whatsoever.
Oh yeah, so you have
So
to
that
say
the only way to let's just say The Hateful Eight, for instance, the only way to see that movie
It's 35.
is on 35 or 70
Or
millimeter in
70,
the theater, and you can never get a DVD, and you can never have it on Netflix, and you can never have it any other way. Period.
Did you hear about this film called The Astrologer that's just been doing the rounds? A lot of people have been on Twitter. It was a lost film.
Yeah, you tell the story.
And
about
I wonder if it fits into what you're talking about. It was a film from '75 where basically no one had heard from the director in 30 years. They assumed there wasn't a single print left. And the Kinsey Institute, you know, which
I was just there.
Oh, yeah, it just came from there. That's why.
No, I mean, it truly was. And
really?
I was in Indiana. That's where it is. It's Indiana
So you
University.
look fatigued, but yeah, no. And so what they did is they had thousands of 35 millimeter prints that were going to get rid of because they didn't want to look after them anymore. Indiana University took all the art house stuff and
They have a
cherry-picked.
massive archive at Indiana University.
Yeah, and they took a lot of these, but the American genre film, the thing down at the Alamo Draft House runs, it's a newish thing. They basically got all the genre stuff. They bought it all, and they combed through it, and they came across a little sticker that said Astrologer. And in 1975, there was a bigger movie called The Astrologer. Glickenhaus directed. The guy made like Exterminate.
Yeah.
Anyway, they threaded up. They go, it can't be that lost film because that would just be too crazy. And of course, it's pristine 35 millimeter print of this lost movie. And this film, and then I think it played at Fantastic Fest this last year, and it's an amazing film because its aspirations are Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
It's a very similar story to that. It's about an astrologer and it's batshit crazy, but it's by a guy who's never made a movie. He has no idea how movies, the language of cinema. And so it's absurd in the same token. It's really entertaining, but it was really, and then everyone said the director owed people money and has disappeared for the last 20 years. People don't know alive or dead or whatnot. A lot of people are digging into it now because but again, when I saw that, I got the feeling like they might go that way. That I felt like this is something we're all experiencing together. We're having an amazing time. It's incredible. It's the least predictable film I've ever seen. You have no idea one beat to the next what the hell's going to happen. And then it ends and you're like, I don't want that to be available on DVD, because if somebody watches that by themselves, they're going to get like, oh, this is stupid. This isn't a good movie. It's like, no, this is an insanely interesting
the hardest thing is just the revenue stream for that. And it would mean the movies have to cost a lot of money to go see them. But I think like, it's the only way that I can think of right now to get people to really care about it. Like if it's like, wow, there's this new Quentin Tarantino movie everyone's talking about. There's only one way to see it. You can't wait for the DVD. You just can't, because it's just, that's not what it's about. And then anything that's shot on digital or whatever is just, it goes either straight to it or whatever. Like movie theaters just become for movies that are movie theater movies. And then digital stuff just goes on digital. And like we just decide that there are different things. The problem is like, who the hell is going to do that? But like, to me, that would make
he would be the person. If anyone's going to do that,
he might do. I mean, he'll do a version of that, I think, because Nolan did a very minor version of it by releasing it 2 days early, you know. And I think Tarantino's going to probably do it a month early. I bet he'll do things like that.
And the way to do what you were saying and never be able to see it, a leeway between that, you could go, I'm not going to make this available for at least a year. So like you guys, if anyone wants to see a Quentin Tarantino film called Hateful Eight,
that's fine. Maybe I'm too extreme with never. Maybe a year's fine.
But like a year is a long. And growing up in New Zealand, it was about that. When I was a kid, it was almost that amount of time before I get American movies on VHS. It was a long, so much anticipation. It took forever. So you would have jumped at the chance to see something theatrically again. So I like that. It's interesting.
I mean, it's like I've never seen like Wicked the play, right? I don't really want to see Wicked the play, but or no. Let me use actually a real example. The South Park one.
The Mormon Book of Mormon.
Yeah, but I've never seen Book of Mormon. It's got to be amazing because no one's ever seen anything else. It's probably. It's not like I can just be like, let me just get a DVD from the performance from the back of the room. Like not even a bootleg, just like a proper, they frame it up and you get to, it's not the same. Like you don't do that. You go see Book of Mormon. That's the way you go see it. And I feel like that's what movies used to feel like. You had to go to them, and now everyone expects the movies to come to them. And I think it's just like, it's a swing that's unfortunate for the respectability of the format.
And we're forgetting like how important an audience is to a movie, like, and not audience like three people home, but like I just seeing It Follows as in a room with maybe a full AFI crowd, all over 30. It was an older crowd. It was at midnight, and I was seeing people who I don't think I've ever seen jump. I've seen people jump out of their seats, and yet afterwards they're all like, oh, it's too long, or wish there was more character development. It's like, fuck all of you. It did exactly what it was meant to do, an expressionist, and it made you jump. But it was really exciting to see without that size scale, it would never have worked. And as a person who's seen too many horror films, I don't react like I used to as a kid. And so not many things make me jump and scare. So actually half of my enjoyment of that movie is watching the people around me in those moments jump and feeling that feeling, that presence of a crowd. If I watch that at home, it will not be the same movie. I watched, did you see the Tommy Lee Jones movie, The Homesman? I heard good things about it. It's
cool.
I didn't get to go to it.
It's worth seeing because there's like horror elements to it. I mean, that's not really, but there's sort of.
I like this previous film.
It's great. But there's some genuinely really bizarre, creepy stuff in that movie because it's these three crazy women, and one of which the performance is like really dark and bizarre. And it's one of the, like I saw people in the theater being really, and what the genius of it is because they thought they were just going to see some like arty Western. So
like he's a classic.
And it is that in a way, but like when the grim subject matter comes up, it's like, it's harsher than you think it's going to be. And it was interesting to watch all these like people react to it who were like, I wasn't expecting that. And then just to see people be, and it was like, it's genuinely some pretty uncomfortable stuff in there.
Interesting. Well, yeah, he has almost a surreal sensibility. I remember Three Burials has some weird stuff in it and weird scenes and some really, I remember a lot of crazy anal sex and just like stuff that you're like, oh, Tommy Lee Jones is this like, very respected figure, but he's great, That was at AFI.
I saw like a DJ screening with a Q&A. Okay. See, I joined the DJ on this movie, so I'm using it to the fullest extent, which means
you just at movies all day when you're not.
I spend a whole lot of money to get a bunch of movie tickets, basically.
That's
and then I'm going to really start going to the doctor every other day. But they do these screenings, and sometimes they have the people there, and so I wrote about it for this website called the Talk House, which is a pretty cool website. Cool. So it was. It's a cool movie. I recommend The Homesman highly.
And have you seen anything else this year in the horror genre that you thought was interesting? Obviously, you hadn't seen a lot of the ones we were just discussing, but
no, I liked what else did I like this year? I liked The Double. I liked I don't know what else. Under the Skin. What else is out this year that's like that in general people are liking? I mean,
all the ones we're talking about.
Certainly, the best three movies I've seen this year are Force Majeure, Boyhood, and I liked The Double a lot.
Did you see Enemy? Because I
haven't seen it yet.
I liked Enemy a lot, and I thought they might be too similar, but I might check out The Double. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I mean, they're similar, I'm sure, in that they're like the two people movies. But Richard Ayoade, I think, is just a really interesting voice, and I think the movie's really cool.
And a funny actor when he's in,
very funny.
What's
Dark Place?
Yeah, Dark Place.
He's brilliant.
Dark Place.
I liked Grand Budapest.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. There's other movies. I try to make a list when I see a movie I like, just so I can remember that like there's some stuff out there. And then my list is not very long this year, but it's there. I'm sure the Active Killing sequel is great. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to Foxcatcher because that real story happened near where I grew up. So it's interesting to me. And I don't know. Life itself was good. I feel like, I don't know. I spend my time watching like 30 for 30s on Netflix.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us about this. We've been wanting to do this
I guess
for
we
so
should
long.
end with this. If there's going to be a final question, do you have a favorite holiday horror film in any of the holidays? Because this is going to play Thanksgiving. So
I don't have a Thanksgiving themed one, but I would say Scrooged.
Oh yeah,
is my favorite.
Yep, love Scrooge. That used to be my Christmas Eve movie.
Yeah,
the 2 hours leading up to Christmas, I'd watch Scrooge
every
movie. Year.
When do you expect the Western to hit? So middle of next year or later?
I think I'll be done in March-ish. It could be, who knows when it will come out. I think it's like kind of an idea of like the end of next year, like December. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I know that for me, I'm on pace to finish it by March.
Would you go festival route with it?
Probably, at least premiere it somewhere.
Right.
I would think. I don't know. If they were just like, we're going to straight release it, that's fine with me. But I would try to maybe have one like celebratory premiere at like a festival for me. But it's not. That's not that important to me. But I think I'm on pace to be finished by March 1st, which probably means April 1st. But it'll like that's kind of the general vibe.
Cool.
Yeah, in the Valley of Violence. Look for it next year.
Yeah.
That is the title still, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks you guys for listening. And we'll be back.
Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Next week with one of the most legendary actors of all time.
That guy.
Let's not say it.
I'll just say that guy.
Don't jinx it. But that guy's coming on next.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.